In my time that I've been here, I've seen different traditions that seem to come and go around Cumberland Heights. And it might be from finding a poem or some words of inspiration to share with someone before they leave, writing welcome notes to the new person entering the women's extended care house, making prayer beads that all have a common bead together, just to name a few that I know about. And I think that's it's a way of hospitality, and it's a way of gratitude, but also a way of leaving a legacy of this time that is spent here at Cumberland Heights. And I think that's where we find ourselves in our reading this morning. Jesus is preparing to make his last appearance with his disciples and his followers. And in this time, he wants to make sure that he leaves them with a legacy that they can follow. He was preparing them for life without his physical presence, so he was taking the time to emphasize how they were to continue the legacy he was leaving through living a life that he modeled for them and for practicing love. And I think this is often what happens here when people create ways to welcome in the newcomer and share meaningful words and symbols when they leave. We want to have those symbols that we can hold on to that remind us to continue with what we have learned. Continue living what has hopefully been modeled from those who have been on this journey for a while. That modeling includes prayer and meditation, reading program literature, attending meetings, working with a sponsor, and being of service. And that list continues to grow and grow as recovery grows. And in the end, I also believe that it comes back to love. Loving the God of your understanding, loving yourself, and being able to love others. But what does love really mean? That's a pretty big word, and we live in a culture that is obsessed with the notion of love. It's in our romantic comedies, showing us that the end true love always prevails. It's in our books, whether they are self-help books or a romantic novel reflecting on the different ways we show and receive love. There's even books on love languages, all the way to the latest steamy novel that you can take to the beach. It's in our music, and we even have a holiday that's dedicated to celebrating a kind of love that often leaves people feeling anxious about that day. But in our reading this morning, we can explore a bit more what love means, at least in this context. Here, to love is to be an advocate. It's to give of oneself for others. But not just give of ourselves, but to do that with the Spirit of God being present in our service to others. So regardless of how you understand who Jesus is, whether you see him as a prophet, a Messiah, or a good guy that had some lessons for us, we have these lessons and legacy of love. We see Jesus throughout the Gospels, loving, advocating, being of service with the poor and marginalized, being with women, persons with disabilities, lepers, strangers, and the imprisoned. He fed the hungry and healed the sick and cared for those who were considered outcasts and unclean. And that list goes on and on. These are all part of his legacy of love. And it can also be a part of our legacy of continuing to demonstrate that love by loving our neighbor and then seeing everyone as our neighbor, seeing them as God sees us all, as all God's beloved. The Spirit of God is still moving among us and within us today as we continue to discern ways to care for those who are marginalized and those who need us. And that is one of the key spiritual principles of this program, one alcoholic and addict helping out another, giving away what we've been given so we can continue to grow. I had a friend one time that called it spirit math. It has to be led by the Spirit for it to make any sense, that if I give something away that I have, I receive more in return. Spirit math. The Spirit is still at work in us and calling us into service. But how do we do it? How do we reflect and live into and embody that kind of love? I think a place that many of us can start is to begin with prayer. And we can pray anytime, in the morning, in the evening, in the middle of the night, out in the courtyard, up on the hill by the ropes course, up by the labyrinth, inside, outside, alone, or with friends. We can pray whether it's a prayer of thanksgiving or distress or towards all kinds of ends. The point I'm trying to share with you is that we can pray anytime, anywhere, for any reason, and know that God is always eager and willing to listen. And I know that this disease sometimes tries to convince people that God is tired of listening to them or has put a limit on prayer requests. But that is this disease talking. This is a human construction of conditions, not an infinite idea of love. So we can pray anytime. And that sounds simple enough, but there usually comes a time when we begin to question or doubt, or sometimes just plain forget to take that time to pray. But I think that that's also a part of what may be missing for a lot of us, making and taking the time to pray throughout the day. Keeping that conscious contact with God throughout the day so we can be aware of those opportunities to be the hands and feet of God in the world. And also to receive God's Spirit to us through others in the world, because we're aware that they're trying to reach out and help us. So maybe we need to challenge some of our notions of prayer and see if it makes sense to us that prayer wasn't intended to be extraordinary, saved for certain times or places, or reserved only for really important matters and moments. So what if we looked at it as that prayer was meant to be ordinary in the sense that it's meant to just be the very fabric of our lives? And with that, then we can pray with what's on our hearts, to keep it simple, which sometimes is a struggle for many of us. Prayer is simply sharing what is most deeply on your heart. So when you are wondering, what should I pray about? I don't have anything to say. You can share and pray whatever you are worried about or thankful for or need support and guidance with, whatever is on your heart. And in that, to remember that we never pray alone, because whenever we pray, we can trust that God is right there with us. I think especially here in treatment, it's important to remember that God is with us, even when we aren't able to feel or connect with that God yet, when we're still working to get that connection back or find it for the first time. So maybe if you are at one of those times where you are struggling with prayer, maybe try telling that to God. However you understand God, that you are struggling with prayer and you're working to trust that God is praying with you. Theologian David Lose offered this suggestion, was to take an index card and write down one thing that you would like God to know about, one thing that you would like help in prayer about, and one thing that you would like to commit to prayer. And it could be anything, small or big, a thanksgiving or a concern, and then pray it. Maybe even share it with others. You can take it up to the labyrinth. Do whatever you may be led to do with this prayer, because that's just part of the point. There is no right or wrong way for us to pray. There's just prayer and learning to connect with the God of your understanding so that you can also learn to connect with that deep spirit love, God's love for you. That time spent in prayer can help us discern what it is that God is calling us to do, and how we can be that advocate in the world. So we witness this kind of love being shown when there's been a natural disaster or a tragedy. And so even though we see all the stories on the media of the tragic events, there are also many stories of people reaching out to be of service. And amidst the chaos, people step up and step out to provide safe places, clothes, money, food, and shelter to help people out. They participate in cleanup crews and rebuilding homes and neighborhoods and lives in so many different ways. And as individuals, we are also advocates within our personal relationships, making healthy sacrifices out of love for others, forgiving, being forgiven, and working towards reconciliation in our relationships. Being willing to be open and honest with ourselves and the people in our lives. Honestly working the steps with a sponsor and living into the principles of these steps. Practicing forgiveness and being willing to accept forgiveness. There can be great freedom that's found in forgiveness when we get to that place of trusting God and allowing the Spirit to move us to a place of love for ourselves, that we want that burden lifted of resentment. There's a lot of wisdom in the big book on letting go of resentments. That suggestion of praying for that person, those things that you want for yourself daily until that resentment releases from you. We can also show love as a community, and we show this love through hospitality. It's shown by those gestures of simply opening the door for people, cleaning off the tables after a meal, being willing to participate and show up for groups, sharing your story and listening to others as they share theirs. I watch it every Sunday morning as the EC men pass out bulletins. Brian leads our hymns, and as they help with the offering, however it happens. This sense of service and call, I know it can sometimes feel overwhelming. And when it does, just please remember that God's Spirit is our advocate, loving us, is present with us, and praying with us. The times we feel powerless or unequipped for a particular task are exactly those times where we need to turn towards God for love and guidance. Last week we sang the song, Spirit of the Living God. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. This is our prayer, to be God's vessels of love, not only holding in within us, but pouring it out for others to receive as we receive. So melt me. Work within me to be more loving. Remove those defects of character that keep me from loving fully, from forgiving, and asking for and accepting forgiveness. Mold me into the person you created me to be, and fill me with your love, compassion, courage, and wisdom. Use me to continue to be of service to the sick and suffering still out there, to be a person of love in the world, working besides others as models, following your example and the example of the promises of this program. There's another verse that was added to this song by another songwriter, and it continues, with Spirit of the living God, move among us all. Make us one in heart and mind, make us one in love. Humble, caring, selfless, sharing. I just think that's a beautiful reminder for how we are to carry ourselves in love. God's Spirit resides in us, empowers us, and equips us. We are one in love. Addiction may dampen that ability to feel and connect with God's Spirit, but addiction cannot remove it from us. God's love is always stronger than addiction. So I invite you to spend time reflecting on the many ways that you have shared and received love. And may we remember the many ways in which we can still grow in our ability to love and leave a legacy of words and actions to equip those who are entering these gates today and in our lives in the days to come. Amen.